The Fu family's wedding procession was like a black centipede, winding its way into the mountain village where Sun Yin had lived for 20 years. Villagers crowded the roadside, pointing fingers at the Rolls-Royce Phantom. The car door opened, and a pair of polished leather shoes stepped onto the muddy ground. The Su family butler frowned, covering his nose with a handkerchief. "Eldest miss, please." The disdain in his tone was unconcealed. Sun Yin stood in front of her teetering earthen house, her body still damp with dew from gathering herbs that morning. She had just pulled a drowning child back from the gates of death. The warmth of silver needles still lingered on her fingertips. "Wait for me to pack my medical kit." "No need," the butler interrupted her. "The Fu family has everything." Sun Yin looked back at the small village that had raised her. In the morning light, smoke curled from chimneys, resembling a faded ink wash painting. She knew that once she left, she would never return. The wedding felt more like a funeral. Inside the Fu manor, glasses clinked and guests were dressed in finery, yet they all wore expressions of anticipating a spectacle. Sun Yin wore a priceless wedding dress, looking like a carefully packaged sacrifice. When she saw Fu Qingyu in the wheelchair, she finally understood why the Su family had been willing to bring her back. The man was emaciated out of shape. The expensive formal were hung loosely on his frame, and his complexion was as ashen as a dying man's. Only his deep-set eyes retained a trace of sharp light, like the final stubbornness of a dying beast. The priest's blessing was interrupted by a fit of violent coughing. Fu Qingyu suddenly pitched forward, spraying dark red blood onto Sun Yin's snow-white wedding dress, looking like red plum blossoms blooming in the snow. The scene instantly turned into chaos. "Qingyu! Qingyu!" Mother Fu's scream pierced the air. The family doctor, Qin Lang, strode forward quickly, placing his fingers on Fu Qingyu's neck, his expression growing darker. "Mr. Fu, the pulse is almost gone." This sentence was like a death sentence. Mother Fu fainted on the spot. Guests whispered amongst themselves, and some were already preparing words of condolence. Amidst the chaos, Sun Yin tore off her heavy veil. She knelt beside Fu Qingyu, placing her cool fingers on his pale wrist. "What are you doing?" The butler moved to pull her away. "If you want him dead, keep stopping me." Her voice was soft, yet it sliced through the noise like a scalpel. In that moment, she was no longer a puppet to be manipulated, but a deity controlling life and death. The pulse was deep, faint, and nearly extinct, like leaking water in a ruined house. This was a critical sign of heat toxins invading the pericardium. Silver needles slid from her sleeve. The 3-inch-long filiform needles glinted coldly under the lights. The first needle pierced the philtrum, the second entered the inner wrist, and the third pointed straight at the center of the chest. Her movements were fluid and natural, as if she had practiced them thousands of times. Ugh! Under everyone's incredulous gaze, Fu Qingyu let out a painful groan and slowly opened his eyes. Dead silence shrouded the entire wedding venue. Sun Yin looked up, meeting Qin Lang's shocked gaze. "Anong Yo Huang Wan, dissolved in water for nasal feeding. Shengmai injection for intravenous drip." Her voice was calm to the point of cruelty, as if she wasn't the one who had just brought the dead back to life. When she tried to wipe the blood from Fu Qingyu's lips, the man used his newly recovered strength to turn his head and avoid her touch. "Get out!" His voice was weak, but his eyes were like blades dipped in poison. Sun Yin was neither angry nor annoyed. Instead, she leaned down close to his ear. At an angle unseen by the crowd, she curled her lips and spoke in a voice only the two of them could hear. "Your life belongs to me now. Fu Qingyu. I specialize in curing the defiant." Fu Qingyu's pupils constricted sharply. Distant bells rang out, startling a flock of white doves. Sun Yin stood in the messy wedding venue, the blood on her dress looking like a blooming red spider lily. She knew that this war had only just begun. 2. On the wedding night, Fu Qingyu's master bedroom was transformed into an intensive care unit. The rhythmic ticking of various precision medical instruments replaced the festive decorations. Dr. Qin Lang, guarding the bedside, stood up immediately upon seeing Sun Yin enter, his attitude respectful. "Mrs. Fu." This title made Sun Yin pause slightly. She looked at the man still unconscious on the bed, His breathing was much more steady, but a shadow of death still hovered between his brows. "How is his pulse?" she asked. Qin Lang reported immediately. "It's stronger than before, but still very weak. Per your instructions, the Anong Yo Wan has been administered." Sun Yin walked to the bed and reached out to check his pulse. "Wait!" A cold voice came from the doorway. Mother Fu walked in with two servants, her gaze scraping over Sun Yin like a knife. "Who allowed you to touch my son?" Sun Yin's hand stopped in midair. "Mom, I'm checking Qingyu's pulse." "No need." Mother Fu walked to the bedside, like a lioness protecting her cub. "Having Dr. Qin here is enough. What does a country girl like you know about medicine?" "It was just blind luck today." Qin Lang opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. Sun Yin slowly withdrew her hand. Looking at the unease and wariness hidden deep in Mother Fu's eyes, she suddenly understood. This noble woman didn't mistrust her medical skills. Rather, she was afraid that Sun Yin really had the power to control Fu Qingyu's life and death. "Very well." Sun Yin was unexpectedly compliant. "I'll take my leave now." As she turned, the hem of her dress brushed against the foot of the bed, stirring up a very faint scent of medicinal herbs. That night, no one at the Fu Manor slept. At 5 in the morning, Sun Yin was startled awake by a flurry of knocking. She threw on a coat and opened the door to find the old butler standing outside, his face full of anxiety. "Young madam, the young master has a high fever again." The master bedroom was in chaos. Fu Qingyu was convulsing painfully on the bed, his forehead frighteningly hot. Qin Lang was injecting him with a sedative, but it was having little effect. Seeing Sun Yin, Mother Fu looked as if she had grabbed onto a life-saving straw, yet also like she was making a final struggle. "You, hurry and take a look at him." Sun Yin, however, was in no rush. She walked to the window first and pulled open the heavy curtains with a swish, letting the morning light flood in. "Remove these instruments first." "What?" Qin Lang froze. "The noise is too loud. It disturbs his peace of mind." Sun Yin's voice was soft, but carried an unquestionable authority. "The patient needs quiet. Not all of you fussing around him like this." Only then did she walk to the bedside and place 3 fingers on Fu Qingyu's wrist. "The heat toxin hasn't cleared, and he's contracted an external pathogen." She withdrew her hand. "Who opened the window last night?" A servant fell to her knees with a thud. It was me." The young master said it was stuffy. "He is a comatose patient right now." Sun Yin's gaze swept over Mother Fu. "How could you listen to the patient?" The remark was pointed, and Mother Fu's face instantly turned pale. Sun Yin opened the wooden medical box she had brought, took out a porcelain bottle, and poured out 2 jade-green pills. "Heart-clearing detox pills. Administer them with honeysuckle water." Mother Fu wanted to intervene, but Qin Lang had already taken the pills. "Mrs. Fu, trust the young madam." Less than a quarter of an hour after taking the medicine, Fu Qingyu's convulsions gradually ceased, and his breathing became steady. Most miraculously, the deathly pallor between his brows had actually faded slightly. The room was filled with silence, save for the rhythmic ticking of the instruments. Sun Yin walked up to Mother Fu, her voice remaining calm. "Now, I touch your son?" Mother Fu opened her mouth, but ultimately stepped back in defeat. After breakfast, Sun Yin encountered an unexpected person in the garden. Old Zhou, the Fu family gardener, was squatting beside the rose bushes, his face pale and cold sweat streaming down. "Old Zhou, is your back pain acting up again?" a passing servant asked. Old Zhou nodded with difficulty, unable to speak a word. Sun Yin walked over. "Let me see." Old Zhou looked at the new young madam in surprise. Before he could refuse, Sun Yin's hand was already pressing on the shunshu acupoint on his lower back. "Does it hurt here?" Old Zhou sucked in a breath of cold air. Sun Yin took out the silver needles she carried with her. After sterilizing them, she placed needles at the shunshu, weizhong, and yanglingquan points. Her technique was astonishingly fast. "This is a blockage caused by cold and dampness. Your meridians are obstructed." She spoke while manipulating the needles. "You slept in damp places when you were young, causing this chronic issue, didn't you?" Old Zhou's eyes widened. How did you know?" When the needles were removed, Old Zhou tried moving his waist and found that it actually didn't hurt anymore. Overcome with emotion, He was about to kneel and kowtow, but Sun Yin stopped him. "I'll write you a prescription for Guiji Fuzi decoction. Drink 3 doses and you'll be fine." This scene was taken in entirely by Fu Qingyu from behind the second-floor window. He had woken up at some point and was leaning against the headboard, gazing with a complex expression at the slender figure in the garden. "Have you looked into it?" he asked the assistant behind him. Sun Yin, 22 years old, grew up in a mountain village in the south. Her foster parents are ordinary farmers, but she studied medicine with the village's old Chinese medicine doctor since childhood. It's said she has cured quite a few intractable diseases. Fu Qingyu narrowed his eyes. In the garden, Sun Yin seemed to sense something and suddenly looked up. Their gazes met in midair. One weak but sharp, the other calm yet resilient. Sun Yin nodded slightly, then turned and left, the hem of her white clothes swaying gently in the morning breeze. Fu Qingyu touched his still weak wrist, where the warmth of her fingertips seemed to linger. Specializing in treating the unconvinced, he repeated her words from yesterday in a low voice, his lips curving into a very faint arc. Interesting. Outside the window, the morning sun was just right. A dying orchid quietly sprouted a new bud in the morning light. Fu Qingyu's high fever had subsided, but he remained weak. He leaned against the headboard, brows furrowed tight as he looked at the bowl of dark brown medicinal soup Sun Yin had brought. "Take it away." Sun Yin remained unmoved, extending the bowl another half-inch forward. "Drink it." The bitter smell of medicine permeated the air, and the confrontation between the two was silent yet intense. Standing to the side, Qin Lang held his breath, not daring to make a sound. "I said take it away." Fu Qingyu's voice was as cold as ice. Sun Yin suddenly smiled. She placed the medicine bowl on the nightstand, turned, and took out an oil paper packet from her medical kit. Inside were several pieces of amber-colored rock sugar. Afraid of the bitterness? She picked up a piece of sugar, her tone like she was coaxing a child. "Eat a piece after drinking the medicine, and it won't be bitter anymore." Fu Qingyu's expression instantly turned grim. He had never been treated like this in his entire life. "Who do you think you're talking to?" "To a patient who refuses to take his medicine." Sun Yin met his sullen gaze without flinching. "Fu Qingyu, I saved your life. Until you are fully recovered, you have to listen to me." Qin Lang drew in a sharp breath. He had never seen anyone dare to speak to Fu Qingyu like that. Unexpectedly, after a moment of silence, Fu Qingyu actually reached out and picked up the bowl. He stared at the dark brown liquid for a long while before draining it in one gulp. The bitterness made him furrow his brows tight. Sun Yin timely held the rock sugar to his lips. Fu Qingyu hesitated for a split second, then opened his mouth to take it. The sweetness spread through his mouth, diluting the bitterness. "Starting tomorrow, I'll add honey to the medicine." Sun Yin packed away the empty bowl, her tone as casual as if she were commenting on the nice weather. She turned to leave, but was stopped by Fu Qingyu. "Sit down." He pointed to the chair beside the bed. "I have something to ask you." In the study, Fu Qingyu's assistant was reporting the investigation results. Sun Yin indeed cured many difficult cases in the village. The most famous was the village chief's chronic leg rheumatism. He had been bedridden for 3 years, but after 2 months of her acupuncture, he could walk again. Fu Qingyu's fingers tapped lightly on the desk. "Go on." But her foster parents didn't treat her well. It said she slept in the woodshed from a young age and often went hungry. What's strange is that the villagers respected her greatly. Anyone who fell ill would go to her. "Respected?" Fu Qingyu raised an eyebrow. "Yes." "And?" The assistant hesitated. She seemed to have foreseen her own fate. Before leaving the village, she distributed all her medicinal herbs to the villagers and even said she wouldn't be coming back. Fu Qingyu looked out the window. The Fu estate was brightly lit in the night, yet the lights could not penetrate the depth in his eyes. The next morning, Sun Yin was gathering dew in the garden. This was her daily routine. Morning dew, when added to medicine, had the effect of clearing the mind and improving vision. Old Joe watched from afar, not daring to disturb her. Since her treatment last time, his back pain had not returned, and he was completely won over by this young madam. "What is the young madam doing?" a new servant asked curiously. "Collecting a medicinal primer." Old Joe lowered his voice. "Young madam's medical skills are like this." He gave a thumbs up. These words reached Fu Qingyu's ears word for word. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling window in the study, watching Sun Yin carefully collect dew from the petals into a porcelain bottle. The morning light gilded her with a golden edge. In that moment, she looked too beautiful to be mortal. Mr. Fu, the assistant pushed the door open, his expression grave. The Lin Group has made a move. They contacted that German medical equipment company before we could. Fu Qingyu's eyes suddenly turned cold. The Lin family was the Fu family's biggest rival in the business world. Now that he was critically ill, they were unscrupulously encroaching on the Fu family's market share. Prepare the car. I'm going to the office. But your health. I won't die, Fu Qingyu said coldly. An hour later, in the top-floor conference room of the Fu Group, the atmosphere was heavy enough to freeze. The executives looked at the pale-faced Fu Qingyu at the head of the table, not daring to breathe loudly. So, you just watched helplessly as the Lin Group stole our partner? Fu Qingyu's voice was soft, yet it sent a shiver down everyone's spine. The marketing director braced himself to explain the conditions offered by the Lin Group were far more generous than ours. Before he could finish, the conference room door was pushed open. Sun Yin stood in the doorway, holding a thermos container. She wore a simple white dress, looking completely out of place in this gathering of elites. Why are you here? Fu Qingyu frowned. To deliver medicine. Sun Yin walked up to him and placed the thermos on the table. You forgot to take your medicine. The room fell dead silent. Everyone was stunned. Fu Qingyu was notorious in the business world for his bad temper. No one had ever dared to interrupt his meeting like this. Even more shocking was that Fu Qingyu didn't get angry. He simply stared at Sun Yin for a moment, then reached out and opened the thermos. The bitter scent of medicine wafted through the air. Just as Fu Qingyu was about to drink the medicine, Sun Yin suddenly pressed down on his hand. Wait! Her gaze swept over the executives present before finally landing on the face of the marketing director. Sir, have you been suffering from insomnia, vivid dreams, a dry mouth, and a bitter taste lately? The marketing director was stunned. How did you know? Excessive liver fire, Sun Yin said indifferently. I suggest you stay up late, less often, and avoid losing your temper. Otherwise, within 3 months, you will inevitably fall seriously ill. She then looked at another executive. You have a weak stomach and suffer from frequent acid reflux and heartburn. Then she turned to another. You have cervical spine issues. Your right hand often goes numb. She pointed out the health problems of several people in the room one by one with absolute precision. The conference room fell into a dead silence. Only then did Sun Yin turn to Fu Qingyu, her voice soft yet clear. Being competitive and aggressive in the business world damages the liver qi the most. Your illness stems from long-term pent-up anger. If you do not rest and cultivate tranquility, even the legendary Dr. Hua Tuo Reborn would not be able to save you. Fu Qingyu looked deeply at her, the emotions in his eyes complex and unreadable. After a long while, he picked up the medicine bowl and drained it in one go. Meeting adjourned. He set down the empty bowl and addressed the room of shocked executives. We will resume discussion tomorrow. Sun Yin took the empty bowl with a faint smile. As she turned to leave, the hem of her skirt traced an elegant arc. Fu Qingyu watched her retreating figure, his fingers unconsciously caressing the handle of the thermal container. In that moment, it suddenly occurred to him that this forced marriage might not have been his worst decision. Fu Qingyu discovered that Sun Yin had quietly woven an invisible web throughout the Fu manor. Poria and Chinese yam were added to his breakfast porridge. The incense in his study was changed to soothing sandalwood. Even his usual coffee was replaced with rose tea to relieve stagnation. What he found most intolerable was Sun Yin's rule that he must retire for the night by 10:00 p.m. I am a patient, not a prisoner. He smashed his third medicine bowl. Sun Yin simply cleaned up the shards in silence, then returned with a fresh bowl. The liver governs the free flow of qi. Anger causes qi to rise. Every time you lose your temper, your recovery is delayed by 3 days. Her voice was always so calm, like a clear mountain spring, leaving his anger with nowhere to vent. But what truly made Fu Qingyu start to take this auspicious bride seriously was what happened next. On Monday morning, The Lin Group suddenly announced the acquisition of one of the Fu Corporation's key partners. When the news arrived, Fu Qingyu was undergoing rehabilitation. He stood up abruptly, his vision going black, and nearly collapsed. "Get the car ready." He braced himself against the wall, his face ashen. "You aren't going anywhere." Sun Yin blocked his path. "Move." Fu Qingyu's voice was cold enough to freeze water. "You don't understand business matters." Sun Yin smiled. "I don't need to understand business. I only need to understand you. Your pulse is currently wiry and rapid, and your liver yang is hyperactive. If you force yourself to go out now, at best you will have a splitting headache. At worst, you will suffer a stroke and paralysis." She took out her acupuncture kit. "Lie down. I'm going to give you acupuncture." Fu Qingyu almost pushed her away, but paused when he met her gaze. Those usually calm, ripple-less eyes now held an unquestionable authority. Inexplicably, he lay down. Silver needles pierced the Taichung, Xinjiang, and Fengqi points. Sun Yin's technique was gentle, yet the sensation was so strong it made his whole body tremble. He suddenly realized that his violent irritability had miraculously subsided. "These are key points on the liver meridian, used to soothe the liver and regulate qi," Sun Yin said, twirling the ends of the needles. "Now you can calmly think of a strategy." Just then, Fu Qingyu's phone rang. His assistant sounded anxious on the other end. "Mr. Fu, the Lin Group has..." "Get to the point." Fu Qingyu's voice was unusually calm. After listening to the report, he fell silent. It turned out the Lin Group had succeeded so quickly because they had bribed a senior executive close to him. After hanging up, Fu Qingyu looked at Sun Yin. "How did you know I needed to be calm?" "Observation, auscultation, inquiry, and palpation. Observation comes first." Sun Yin began removing the needles. "This morning, the furrows between your brows were deep, and your face was flushed with bloodshot eyes. These are typical signs of excessive liver fire. Decisions made in such a state are wrong 9 times out of 10. Fu Qingyu remained silent for a long time. That night, Fu Qingyu developed a low-grade fever. Sun Yin stayed by his bedside, wiping his forehead with a damp towel. In the dead of night, she heard him muttering in his sleep, "No, I can't lose again." In that moment, she suddenly saw the vulnerability deep within this powerful man. At 3 a.m., Fu Qingyu woke up to find Sun Yin still keeping watch by his bed. She had fallen asleep, leaning against the back of the chair, still clutching the semi-dry towel in her hand. Moonlight filtered through the sheer curtains, illuminating her quiet, sleeping face. In this moment, she was no longer the doctor who was calm to the point of coldness, but simply an exhausted young girl. Fu Qingyu reached out gently, wanting to brush away the stray hairs on her forehead. Sun Yin suddenly startled awake. Their eyes locked, and the air seemed to freeze. "You have a fever." She was the first to look away, reaching out to touch his forehead. This time, Fu Qingyu didn't pull away. Her fingertips were cool, yet soft to the touch. "Why did you watch over me?" he asked. "You are my patient," she answered quickly. So quickly it sounded like a rehearsed line. Fu Qingyu didn't ask anything else. He simply watched her as she busied herself preparing medicine and checking his temperature, suddenly feeling that this illness perhaps wasn't so terrible after all. The next day, Fu Qingyu did something that stunned everyone. During a high-level video conference, he announced in front of all the directors, "From now on, Sun Yin is solely responsible for my health. Her decisions are my decisions." Even Sun Yin was taken aback. After the meeting ended, Fu Qingyu stopped her as she was about to leave. "From now on," he said, looking in her eyes, "I'm putting myself in your hands." His words carried a hint of ambiguity, causing the tips of Sun Yin's ears to flush slightly. But she quickly regained her composure. "Then please, President Fu, follow the doctor's orders strictly." She handed him a schedule, densely packed with notes and instructions. Fu Qingyu took the sheet, the corners of his lips curling up slightly. "Dr. Su, has anyone ever told you?" "Told me what?" "That you look very beautiful when you're serious." Sun Yin's heart skipped a beat. She turned and walked away, her pace much faster than usual. Watching her slightly flustered, retreating figure, Fu Qingyu smiled from the bottom of his heart for the first time. Outside the window, it had started to rain unnoticed. A rose bush, once beaten down by the wind and rain, was standing tall again under the gardener's meticulous care. Just like him. Fu Qingyu's speed of recovery shocked everyone. In less than 2 weeks, he could walk unassisted for half an hour, and color had returned to his pale face. Qin Lang looked at the latest medical report, marveling repeatedly. President Fu, all your indicators are improving. This is simply a medical miracle. Fu Qingyu's gaze, however, followed Sun Yan, who was drying medicinal herbs on the terrace. In the morning light, she carefully turned over the angelica root in the bamboo sieve, her movements as gentle as if she were caressing an infant. It's not a miracle, he said faintly. It's her medical skill. The protectiveness in his tone made Qin Lang pause for a moment. But beneath the calm, undercurrents were surging. During lunch, Fu Qingyu received a phone call. As he listened, his expression gradually darkened. Understood. He hung up the phone, his fingers unconsciously tapping on the table, a sign that he was about to lose his temper. Sun Yin put down her chopsticks and studied his face closely. Your liver fire is flaring up again. What happened? For once, Fu Qingyu didn't refuse to share. The Lin Group is pulling tricks again. They bribed the deputy chief engineer of the R&D department and stole the core data for our new drug. That deputy chief engineer, Sun Yan asked suddenly, is he short a bit on the heavy side, with a mole at the tip of his left eyebrow? Fu Qingyu was stunned. How did you know? I saw him once when I went to the company to deliver medicine. Sun Yan spoke calmly. His complexion was dull and stagnant, and the sides of his nose were red, a typical brandy nose physiognomy. People with these features are often greedy for pleasure, weak-willed, and easily tempted. Fu Qingyu looked at her deeply. You understand face reading, too? Traditional Chinese medicine relies on observation, olfactory examination, inquiry, and palpation. Observation naturally includes reading facial features. She stood up, filled a bowl with mung bean soup, and placed it in front of him. Cool down your internal heat first. This situation might not be irretrievable. That afternoon, Sun Yin did something unexpected. She had the butler invite the deputy chief engineer's wife over. The woman entered with a guarded expression, but froze when she saw the tea and snacks Sun Yin had prepared. They were all specialties from her hometown. Mrs. Wang, I heard you haven't been sleeping well lately. Sun Yin handed her a cup of soothing tea. I specially blended some herbs for you. Drinking a cup before bed should help. Mrs. Wang took the teacup, her expression complex. What did the young madam want to see me about? I just wanted to ask something, Sun Yin said gently. Has your husband been coming home late, often recently, smelling of perfume? Mrs. Wang's face paled instantly. Sun Yin gently placed her hand over Mrs. Wang's. Women shouldn't make life difficult for other women. I only want to remind you that once you go down the wrong path, there is no turning back. She handed her a sachet. The herbs inside will help soothe the nerves and aid sleep. I hope both you and your husband can get a good night's rest. When Mrs. Wang left, her steps were somewhat unsteady. That evening, Fu Qingyu received a mysterious phone call. After listening, he remained silent for a long time before going to Sun Yin's pharmacy. She was grinding medicinal herbs, the air filled with a complex herbal fragrance. Deputy Chief Engineer Wang has turned himself in. Fu Qingyu leaned against the doorframe. He handed over all the evidence and testified against the Lin Group. Sun Yin didn't even look up. Isn't that a good thing? Did you do it? He asked. How did you know he would turn himself in? Sun Yin finally paused what she was doing. I didn't do anything. I merely told his wife some facts. As for why he turned himself in. She turned around, her gaze clear and bright. What does a man whose body has been hollowed out by wine and women fear the most? Fu Qingyu seemed to come to a realization. I studied his features. The bridge of his nose was collapsed, and there was darkness beneath his eyes, signs of a short life. Sun Yin continued in a calm tone. People like that cherish their lives above all else. When he learned he didn't have long to live, he naturally made the choice that was most beneficial to himself. Fu Qingyu took a few steps closer. The scent of medicinal herbs grew stronger. He suddenly noticed that under the light, Sun Yin's eyes took on a translucent amber hue, reminiscent of aged medicinal herbs. Who exactly are you? He asked softly. How would a girl from the countryside know so much? Sun Yin lowered her gaze and continued grinding the herbs. I'm just a doctor. Late that night, Fu Qingyu was in his study reviewing surveillance footage. On the screen, Vice Chief Engineer Wang's wife left the Fu residence and went straight to the company to find her husband. The two had a fierce argument in his office, during which Mrs. Wang suddenly fainted. When the ambulance arrived, Vice Chief Engineer Wang knelt on the floor, weeping like a child. Fu Qingyu turned off the monitor and made a call. Check Vice Chief Engineer Wang's medical report from today. The results came back quickly. Terminal liver cancer, 3 months left at most. Fu Qingyu sat in the darkness, motionless for a long time. He thought of Sun Yin's mention of the signs of a short life, her certain gaze, and her focused profile as she prepared the medicine. This nominal wife of his was like the most complex of medicinal ingredients, gentle on the surface, but possessing potent properties underneath, capable of saving lives, but also capable of causing harm. Suddenly, it began to rain outside. Fu Qingyu walked to the window and saw that the light in the pharmacy was still on. Amidst the rain, that light appeared warm and steadfast, like the solitary star in a dark night. He picked up an umbrella and walked out. Lin Weiwei's arrival was like a stone cast into a lake, shattering the peace that had settled over the Fu estate for days. Wearing the latest seasonal Chanel suit and balancing on 4-inch heels, her perfume arrived before she did. Upon seeing Sun Yin arranging flowers in the living room, she looked her up and down, her red lips curving into a smile of undisguised mockery. "So, you're the bride Qingyu brought in to ward off his bad luck." She emphasized the words ward off bad luck heavily. Sun Yin did not stop pruning the flower branches. She merely glanced at her faintly. Miss Lin has a sallow complexion and pale lips, signs of a deficiency in both qi and blood. I suggest you consume fewer cold drinks and drink more red date and longan tea. The smile froze on Lin Weiwei's face. News of this confrontation quickly reached Fu Qingyu's ears. "You made Weiwei cry?" he asked Sun Yin, his tone betraying no emotion. Sun Yin was preparing his afternoon herbal tea. She didn't look up as she replied, "I was only doing my duty as a doctor. Her menstruation has been irregular for at least 3 years. If she doesn't treat it properly, it will affect her fertility in the future." Fu Qingyu fell silent for a moment. "How do you know?" "Basic observation," she said, placing the prepared herbs into the teapot. Although she wore heavy makeup, the dullness at her temples and the acne on her chin are manifestations of hormonal imbalance. Coupled with how she kept pressing her hand against her lower abdomen just now, she's suffered from dysmenorrhea for at least 5 years, hasn't she? Fu Qingyu had to admit, he was shaken. Lin Weiwei did indeed have severe menstrual pain. It was an open secret within their circle. "A healer's heart is benevolent," Sun Yin said, pushing the brewed tea toward him. "In my eyes, there are only patients, not romantic rivals." She said this so frankly that Fu Qingyu didn't know how to respond. However, Lin Weiwei was not willing to give up. The next day, she returned, bringing a white-haired elder with her. "Qingyu, this is Professor Zhang Jingming, a national master of traditional Chinese medicine," she introduced triumphantly. "I specially invited him to examine you. Some people use amateur tactics, learn from God knows where. Don't let them delay your treatment." Zhang Jingming stroked his beard, his posture arrogant. "Mr. Fu, let this old man check your pulse." Fu Qingyu looked at Sun Yin, but she simply smiled faintly. "Please, Professor Zhang." Zhang Jingming closed his eyes to feel the pulse. After a long while, he opened them. "Mr. Fu, this is pathogenic heat trapped internally. You need a large dose of white tiger decoction added to ginseng soup to clear the heat and promote fluid production. The previous prescription was too mild. I fear it was treating the symptoms, but not the root cause." Everyone looked at Sun Yin. She, however, walked unhurriedly up to Zhang Jingming. "Professor Zhang, have you been experiencing heart palpitations, insomnia, and night sweats recently?" Zhang Jingming's expression changed slightly. "What do you mean?" "Your left hand has been trembling slightly, and your voice lacks core strength. These are signs of heart deficiency," Sun Yin said in a calm tone. "If I'm not mistaken, you have been taking Emperor of Heaven's heart tonifying pellets recently, but with poor results." Zhang Jingming's beard quivered. How did you know?" "Because you prescribed the wrong medicine." Sun Yan's voice was clear and firm. The Emperor of Heaven's heart-nourishing pill nourishes yin and blood to calm the spirit. It suits those with heart and kidney deficiency. However, your condition stems from liver stagnation manifesting as fire, which disturbs the spirit. You should take Danji Xiaoyao powder instead. She turned, wrote down a prescription, and handed it to Zhang Jingming. Try this prescription. You will see results in 3 doses. Zhang Jingming took the prescription. The more he read, the wider his eyes grew. Finally, he stood up and bowed deeply to Sun Yan. Listening to your words is worth more than 10 years of study. It is I who lack proficiency in the arts of healing. This scene drained the color from Lin Weiwei's face. That night, Fu Qingyu's condition suddenly relapsed. He developed a high fever, his consciousness blurred, and he rambled deliriously. Qin Lang paced around anxiously, completely at a loss for what to do. After checking his pulse, Sun Yan's expression changed abruptly. This pulse is wrong. She suddenly looked out the window. Who came to the pharmacy today? The servant answered tremblingly. This afternoon, Miss Lin said she wanted to learn how to make soup and stayed in the pharmacy for a while. Sun Yan walked quickly into the pharmacy. After carefully inspecting the medicinal herbs, her hand paused as she picked up a packet of cassia twigs. What is it? Fu Qingyu asked weakly. The cassia twigs have been swapped for cinnamon bark. Sun Yan's voice was as cold as ice. Your current condition requires inducing sweat to release the exterior, which calls for cassia twigs. But cinnamon bark is extremely hot in nature. Using it on your condition, where the heat toxin hasn't yet cleared, is like pouring oil on a fire. The room fell into dead silence. Fu Qingyu's gaze turned thoroughly cold. Get Lin Weiwei over here. His voice was soft, yet it made one shudder. When Lin Weiwei arrived, she tried to deny it, but faced with the evidence Sun Yan presented, she finally broke down and cried. Brother Qingyu, I just didn't want to watch you be bewitched by this woman. Get out. Fu Qingyu closed his eyes. From now on, never step foot in the Fu home again. After Lin Weiwei was taken away, Fu Qingyu looked at Sun Yan, who was preparing medicine. You saved me again. Sun Yan handed him the prepared medicine. A healer's duty. Just duty. He grasped her wrist. No selfish motives at all. Her pulse beat against his fingertips, rapid and strong. I do, she admitted frankly. If you die, I'll be a widow. That would be a huge loss. Fu Qingyu chuckled low. This was the first time Sun Yan had heard him laugh like that. Outside the window, a bright moon hung high. The clay pot on the medicine stove bubbled, and amidst the curling steam, for the first time, their gazes did not clash, but intertwined. The Lin Weiwei incident was like a sudden downpour. After it washed over them, the atmosphere in the Fu manor became subtle and tranquil. Fu Qingyu no longer showed any resistance to Sun Yan's medical orders. He took his medicine on time, cooperated with acupuncture, and even began eating according to the diet plan she created. But even more obvious than that was how his gaze began to linger on her figure for long periods. Early that morning, Sun Yan discovered a rosewood box in the pharmacy. Inside the box was a set of long-lost bien stone needles, their bodies glowing with the warm luster of ancient jade. The attached card bore only 3 words, written in bold and vigorous strokes, to compensate you. She recognized this set of needles. She had seen illustrations of them in ancient TCM texts. It was said they were used by imperial physicians during the Ming dynasty and had long been lost to history. She wondered how much effort Fu Qingyu had spent to find them. This is too valuable, she said while administering acupuncture to him. Fu Qingyu kept his eyes closed, feeling the subtle flow of qi as she inserted the needles. It doesn't compare to the number of times you've saved me. The silver needle pierced the Tanzhong acupoint on his chest, and he let out a muffled groan. Does it hurt? She asked. It's worth it. In the afternoon, Fu Qingyu handled official business in the study, while Sun Yan organized medical records nearby. After finishing a call, his brows knitted together. Another project has run into problems. Sun Yan looked up and scrutinized his complexion. Have you been staying up late again these past 2 days? There's a merger case that's very thorny. She stood up, walked to his side, and brooking no refusal, pressed her fingers to his wrist. After taking his pulse for a moment, her brows furrowed slightly. Liver stagnation turning into fire, deficiency of both heart and spleen. If this continues, all previous treatments will be wasted. Rarely did Fu Qingyu not retort. He simply rubbed the space between his eyebrows. This deal is very important to the Fu Corporation. Sun Yin was silent for a moment, then suddenly asked, "Is it that plot of land in the south of the city?" Fu Qingyu looked at her in surprise. "How did you know? Last time I went to the company, I heard the executives discussing it." Her tone was calm. "The feng shui of that land has issues." Feng shui. Fu Qingyu laughed involuntarily. "You understand even that. Traditional Chinese medicine emphasizes the correspondence between heaven and humanity. People and their environment are one." She walked to the window and pointed south. "That land has an elevated highway in front, like a slashing knife, and polluted water surrounding the back. It is a typical pattern of Shachi rushing the heart. Building a commercial center in such a place will inevitably breed disputes and gossip, leading to financial loss and harm to people." Fu Qingyu's expression turned serious. "Go on." "Simply put, the energy field of that land amplifies negative emotions in decision-makers, making them irritable and prone to errors in judgment." She looked back at him. "Your insomnia and vivid dreams these past few days are a result of its influence." Fu Qingyu fell into deep thought. Indeed, since starting this project, internal conflicts within the team had been ceaseless. Key executives had made successive mistakes, and even he himself had become unusually agitated. "Is there a solution?" Sun Yin took out an ancient bronze coin, tied it with a red string, and hung it in the southeast corner of the study. "First, we neutralize the malevolent energy in the house. As for that land," she smiled faintly, "I actually have an idea." 3 days later, the Fu Group announced modifications to the plans for the South City project. The original commercial center was transformed into a TCM wellness town, with plans adding vast medicinal herb plantations and rehabilitation therapy centers. Even more unexpected was that Fu Qingyu had invited several titans of the traditional Chinese medicine world to serve as project consultants. As soon as the news broke, public opinion was in an uproar. Everyone thought Fu Qingyu had lost his mind. However, at the project briefing, Fu Qingyu's performance silenced all the skeptics. He not only detailed the project's business model, but also spoke about TCM wellness concepts with authoritative familiarity. When reporters asked difficult questions, he could even accurately describe the properties, flavors, and meridian tropes of various medicinal herbs. "Mr. Fu, since when did you know so much about Chinese medicine?" a familiar reporter teased. Fu Qingyu cast his gaze toward a corner of the audience, his eyes unconsciously softening. "I received guidance from an expert." In that corner, Sun Yin, wearing a simple white suit, was looking down and taking notes. Sunlight spilled over her through the glass dome, gilding her with a golden edge. At the celebration banquet that night, Fu Qingyu toasted Sun Yin for the first time. "Thank you." His eyes were deep. "Not just for this project." Sun Yin substituted tea for wine and smiled slightly. "It was your own decisiveness." "No." He shook his head. "You made me realize that sometimes the greatest strength isn't meeting force with force, but going with the flow." He took a step closer, his voice low. "Just like what you did to me." They were close enough to feel each other's breath. Sun Yin could smell the faint scent of medicinal herbs on him, the scent of the calming sachet she had blended for him. "I used your method," he continued. "With the Lin family, I didn't engage in a head-on confrontation. Instead, I cut off their capital chain, without wasting a single soldier. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The next best is to disrupt their alliances." Sun Yin quoted the art of war. "Treating a disease is like commanding troops. Using medicine is like deploying soldiers. Business warfare is the same." Fu Qingyu looked deeply at her. "Sun Yin, how many more surprises do you have that I don't know about?" Just then, Qin Lang hurried over and whispered a few words in Fu Qingyu's ear. Fu Qingyu's expression instantly became grave. "What's wrong?" Sun Yin asked. He was silent for a moment before speaking slowly. "Lin Weiwei committed suicide." Sun Yin's pupils contracted sharply. Outside the window, the night was deep. The sky, which had just cleared, was gathering new dark clouds. Lin Weiwei's emergency surgery lasted 6 hours. When Fu Qingyu and Sun Yin arrived at the hospital, Lin Weiwei's parents rushed up with red eyes. Mrs. Lin's hand almost slapped Sun Yin's face. "It's all you jinx. You forced Weiwei to her death." Fu Qingyu pulled Sun Yin behind him to protect her, his gaze cold. "Mrs. Lin, please conduct yourself with dignity." "Dignity?" Mr. Lin gritted his teeth. "Fu Qingyu, if anything happens to my daughter, the Lin family is not done with you." The operating room doors opened at that moment. The doctor walked out and removed his mask. "Her life is saved, but she lost too much blood and is still in a coma. Furthermore," he paused, "Ms. Lin was pregnant. The baby didn't make it." The news exploded like a thunderclap. Mrs. Lin fainted on the spot. Mr. Lin glared at Fu Qingyu, looking as if he wanted to skin him alive. "You'd better give me an explanation." In a car on the way back, the atmosphere was so heavy it felt tangible. Sun Yin suddenly spoke. "The child wasn't yours." Fu Qingyu turned his head sharply. "How do you know?" "The pulse." Sun Yin's tone was calm. "I checked her pulse when she came to the Fu residence last time. She wasn't pregnant then. Moreover," she paused, "she suffers from cold stagnation in the uterus and disharmony in the Chong and Rim meridians. It is extremely difficult for her to conceive to begin with. Even if she did, it would be hard to keep the baby." Fu Qingyu's gaze became complicated. "You can diagnose even that. In Chinese medicine, we believe the affinity for children is also destined." Sun Yin gazed at the passing lights outside the window. She forced too many things that didn't belong to her, and in doing so, damaged her foundation. The next day, the truth came to light. After waking up, under her parents' interrogation, Lin Weiwei finally admitted that the child belonged to one of her personal trainers. She had intended to use the child to force Fu Qingyu's hand, but she ended up outsmarting herself. "Brother Qingyu, I just love you so much." She sobbed uncontrollably into the phone. Fu Qingyu hung up without hesitation. When he walked into the pharmacy, Sun Yin was pounding herbs. The sound of the pestle striking the mortar was steady and rhythmic, as if soothing away all the chaos. "Did you know all along?" he asked. Sun Yin did not look up. A healer can diagnose an illness, but cannot cure the human heart. Fu Qingyu sat down across from her. If you hadn't exposed her switching the medicine that day, perhaps she would have resorted to even more extreme measures. Sun Yin paused her movements and looked straight into his eyes. "Fu Qingyu, your biggest problem is that you always take the blame for others' mistakes. In Chinese medicine, this is known as worry injuring the spleen, and it is the root cause of your lingering illness." He was stunned. Lin Weiwei's obsession wasn't caused by me, nor by you. Her voice was soft, yet every word was clear. She chose this path herself. That night, Fu Qingyu developed a high fever. The illness came on fast and fierce. His body was burning hot, his consciousness blurred, and he was plagued by constant nightmares. Qin Lang tried various methods, but his temperature refused to come down. After checking his pulse, Sun Yin's expression turned grave. "This isn't an external infection. It is an injury caused by emotions. The 7 emotions are repressed internally, transforming into fire." She took out her finest silver needles and inserted them into the Laogong point on his hand and the Taichung point on his foot. These were crucial points for clearing the heart and draining fire. As soon as the needles pierced his skin, Fu Qingyu began to tremble violently, large beads of cold sweat seeping from his forehead. "Bear with it." Sun Yin held down his restless hand. "The pent-up fire must be released, or it will become a chronic malady." Half an hour later, Fu Qingyu's temperature began to drop. He opened his eyes wearily to see Sun Yin sitting by the bed, wiping his sweat with warm water. "You've saved me once again." His voice was hoarse. "This time is different." Sun Yin shook her head. "I am your doctor. Curing your heart's affliction is my duty." She put down the towel and looked into his eyes. "Fu Qingyu, how much longer are you going to let the past trap you?" He fell silent. Moonlight streamed in through the window, casting chiaroscuro shadows on his face. "When I was 10, I watched with my own eyes as my mother jumped from the rooftop of the Fu family home." He spoke suddenly, his voice terrifyingly calm. "That day, she had a huge argument with my father because he had brought his mistress home." Sun Yin's hand trembled slightly. Everyone says the Fu Corporation was founded solely by my father, but few know that the initial investment came from my mother's dowry. He forced a sarcastic smile. She didn't get a single apology, even up to her death. Is that why you work so desperately? To make the Fu Corporation the biggest? I want to prove that even without him, I can succeed. His eyes were as dark as the night. I want to make everyone who abandoned the Fu family regret it. Sun Yin gently held his hand. This time, he did not pull away. Liver stagnation and qi blockage, turning into fire over time. She spoke softly. The root of your illness was planted 20 years ago. Outside the window, a light rain had begun to fall unnoticed. The patter of the rain sounded like a soft sigh for someone. Fu Qingyu tightened his grip on her fingers, squeezing hard enough to cause her pain. Sun Yin, he asked in a low voice, can you cure me? Her answer dissipated into the rainy night, light as a vow. I will do my best. 9. Fu Qingyu's right arm was slashed by shattered glass, leaving a wound so deep the bone was visible. Blood soaked his expensive suit shirt, dripping onto the marble floor and blooming into shocking red flowers. Yet he seemed to feel no pain, staring dead at the direction the crazed driver had fled, his eyes as cold as Siberian permafrost. Are you crazy? Sun Yin tore a strip from the hem of her shirt, moving deftly to apply pressure and stop the bleeding. Why did you block it with your hand? He finally withdrew his gaze and looked down at her. She was kneeling beside him, focused entirely on treating his wound. Her thick lashes cast a small shadow beneath her eyes, trembling slightly. The direction he rammed into us from, Fu Qingyu's voice was raspy from blood loss, was targeting your driver's seat. Sun Yin's hand paused in its bandaging. The Fu Manor was once again shrouded in a tense atmosphere. Qin Lang stitched up Fu Qingyu's wound, his expression grave. The wound is very deep. It missed the radial artery by a hair. Mr. Fu, you need to rest and recover properly. But Fu Qingyu seemed not to hear him, ordering his assistant coldly. Investigate the origin of that car, the driver's background, and anyone who has been in contact with the Lin family recently. Do you think this is retaliation from the Lin family? Sun Yin brought over the freshly brewed herbal soup. The dark liquid gave off a bitter aroma. I don't think so. I know so. Fu Qingyu took the medicine bowl with his uninjured left hand and drained it in one gulp, not even knitting his brows. Lin Weiwei's father won't let this go. Sun Yin looked at his face, pale from blood loss, and his eyes burning with cold fury. She suddenly reached out and placed her fingers on his uninjured left wrist. Excessive liver fire, restless heart pulse, she diagnosed. What you need now is recuperation, not revenge. Fu Qingyu pulled his hand back. Sun Yin, this isn't your concern. I am your doctor. She didn't back down. Your physical condition is my business. The two stared at each other. The air seemed to freeze. The servants held their breath, daring not to make a sound. Finally, Fu Qingyu looked away first. He leaned back against the headboard wearily and closed his eyes. Suit yourself. Late at night, Sun Yin brought a fresh batch of healing salve to the master bedroom. Fu Qingyu was asleep, but fitfully. His forehead was covered in a fine sheen of cold sweat, and his brows were knit tight, as if he were trapped in a nightmare. She gently lifted the covers to examine the wound on his right arm. The stitches were red, a sign of inflammation. Just as she was about to apply the medicine, Fu Qingyu jolted awake, his left hand gripping her wrist like an iron clamp. Ooh! His gaze turned sharp after a moment of confusion. Seeing it was her, he slowly released his grip. It's you. Did you have a nightmare? She calmly rotated her wrist, which hurt from his grip. He didn't answer, only looking at the ointment in her hand. What is that? White jade regenerating salve. I made it myself. It promotes healing and prevents scarring. She scooped up a little with a bamboo spatula and carefully applied it around his wound. The ointment felt cool against his skin, quickly soothing the burning pain. Fu Qingyu's tense body gradually relaxed. You always have a way, he said suddenly. What? No matter how bad the situation is, you always have a solution. His voice sounded exceptionally low in the night. Just like how you suddenly appeared in my life and pulled me back from the gates of hell. Sun Yin didn't stop applying the medicine. I'm a doctor. Curing the sick and saving lives is my duty. Just your duty? He repeated the question, But this time his tone was different, carrying a hint of probing. Sun Yin didn't answer. She focused on finishing the wound treatment and bandaged it up again. "Go to sleep," she said, tucking him in. "I'm here." She didn't leave. Instead, she sat on the chair by the bed, picked up a medical book, and read quietly by the light of the bedside lamp. Fu Qingyu watched her profile, softened by the lamplight, and suddenly spoke. "Since my mother passed away, no one has ever watched over me like this." Sun Yin's fingers paused as she turned a page. "When I was young, every time I got sick, she would sit up all night with me like this." His voice was faint, as if he were talking to himself. "After she was gone, my father would only stand by my sickbed and scold me for falling behind on my studies." This was the first time he had voluntarily revealed the most tender wound in his heart to her. Sun Yin put down her book and walked to the bedside. She didn't speak. She simply reached out and gently covered his uninjured left hand with hers. Her hand was small and soft, yet it carried a firm strength. Fu Qingyu turned his hand to clasp hers. His grip wasn't tight, yet it allowed no escape. "Sun Yin." He looked at her, his eyes as deep as the ocean. "Stay." It wasn't an order, nor was it a request. It was a solemn decision. Moonlight flowed in through the window, casting their shadows on the wall where they intertwined, indistinguishable from one another. That night, Fu Qingyu slept exceptionally well, and Sun Yin watched over him the entire night until the break of dawn. Morning light filtered through the thin mist, draping the Fu estate in a soft veil of gauze. Sun Yin was in the herb garden picking dew-covered honeysuckle. As her fingers brushed against the leaves, she suddenly felt a wave of dizziness. She grabbed the bamboo trellis next to her for support, closed her eyes to focus, and felt an unusual pulsation within her body. "What's wrong?" Fu Qingyu's voice came from behind her. He was wearing dark gray loungewear, his right arm still in a sling, but his color was much improved. Sun Yin quickly straightened up, shifting the basket of herbs to her other side. "It's nothing. I just got a little dizzy from squatting too long." He walked up to her, scrutinizing her face. "You don't look well. Maybe because I haven't had breakfast yet." She tried to step around him, but he blocked her path with his uninjured left hand. "Let me see." His tone brooked no refusal. Sun Yin helplessly extended her wrist. Fu Qingyu's warm fingertips rested on her cold skin. His movements were unpracticed yet earnest. He was using the basics of pulse diagnosis she had taught him recently. "Well, Dr. Fu," she asked teasingly. His brow gradually furrowed. "Your pulse is very strange." "Strange how?" "It's very fast, but also very weak." He struggled to recall the knowledge of pulse diagnosis she had taught him. "It's like..." The vibration of a zither string stretched to its breaking point. Sun Yin was slightly startled. She hadn't expected that after studying for such a short time, he could already perceive such subtle changes. "It is a slippery pulse." She withdrew her hand, her tone calm. "I am pregnant." Fu Qingyu froze in place. The morning breeze swept across the herb garden, carrying the fresh scent of various medicinal herbs. Birdsong drifted from the distance, while nearby, the sound of dew sliding off leaves could be heard. Time seemed to stand still. "How long?" He finally spoke, his voice husky. "Over a month." She bent down to continue picking honeysuckle, her movements remaining composed. "During that time, when your condition relapsed." Fu Qingyu grasped her wrist. His grip was light this time, yet it carried a firmness that allowed no escape. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" She raised her eyes to look at him. "That your bride, brought in for luck, actually brought you an heir?" The self-mockery in her words tightened his chest. "Sun Yin." He called her by her full name, enunciating every syllable with heavy emphasis. "This is our child." "I know." She looked down at her lower abdomen, her gaze complex. "But I need time to confirm whether this child can be kept." "What do you mean?" "I have had a cold constitution since childhood. It was never easy for me to conceive." Her voice was faint, coupled with the mental and physical toll of treating your illness recently. "The pregnancy is unstable. It still needs observation." Only then did Fu Qingyu notice the dark shadows under her eyes and a complexion paler than usual. These details, previously ignored by him, now became needles pricking at his heart. "From today on, hand everything over to others." He spoke decisively. You only need to rest and recover. Sun Yin shook her head. No, your injuries haven't healed yet, and the threat from the Lin family hasn't been lifted. Besides, she paused for a moment. This child hasn't come at the right time. What do you mean? His gaze turned sharp abruptly. Fu Qingyu, have you thought about it? She met his gaze. Between us, from the very beginning, it has been a transaction. This child will only make everything more complicated. A transaction? He took a step forward, the tip of his nose almost touching hers. You think what we have is just a transaction? Is it not? She retorted. You needed someone to bring you luck, and I needed a shelter. We each took what we needed, a fair trade. His gaze darkened, churning with emotions she couldn't decipher. Sun Yin, you really are the most heartless woman I have ever met. He spoke through gritted teeth. Ruthless to yourself, and even more ruthless to others. She remained silent. Suddenly, he bent down and swept her up into his arms. What are you doing? She exclaimed, her hand instinctively protecting her lower abdomen. Going back to the room to rest. He carried her toward the main building, his steps steady, not looking at all like a wounded man. Since you think it's a transaction, then let's renegotiate the terms. He placed her gently on a large bed in the master bedroom, then sat on the edge, his gaze burning as he looked at her. Condition 1. From today on, you move back into the master bedroom. Condition 2. All the work of decocting and preparing medicine is to be left to the servants. You are only responsible for writing the prescriptions. Condition 3. He reached out and gently covered her lower abdomen. This child, I want to be born safely. Sun Yin looked at the earnestness in his eyes, and the hardest part of her heart seemed to be gently touched by something. Then what is your condition? He leaned down and whispered in her ear, My condition is, try to trust me, just as I trust your medical skills. His breath brushed against her ear, carrying the scent of medicine and a certain tenderness she dared not delve into deeply. Outside the window, the morning sun finally broke through the mist, bathing the entire bedroom in brilliant gold. In the herb garden, the honeysuckle stretched its branches and leaves under the sunlight, and the tiny flower buds were quietly blooming. Sun Yin closed her eyes, feeling the faint heartbeat beneath her palm. Perhaps some destinies are doomed from the very start to be more than just a transaction. 11. Fu Qingyu's study changed its appearance overnight. The sharp corners of the desk were wrapped in soft bumper strips. The sleek marble floor was covered with a thick cashmere carpet, and even the agarwood incense he was accustomed to had been replaced by a soothing incense specially made by Sun Yin. The elegant scent of silk tree flowers and wild jujube seeds flowed quietly through the room. There is no need for this, Sun Yin said softly, watching his back as he personally adjusted the room temperature. Fu Qingyu turned around and placed a cup of warm longan and red date tea into her hands. Qin Lang said the first 3 months are the most critical. His gaze fell upon her still flat lower abdomen, where a secret lay hidden that neither of them dared to disturb. Sun Yin took the cup. The temperature was just right, and the sweetness was precise. He had remembered even the slightest nuances of her taste. However, beneath the calm, the undercurrents never ceased. 3 days later, the stock price of the Fu Group plummeted. Rumors circulated that Fu Qingyu was critically injured with no hope of recovery, and that the Fu family had no successor. Clearly, someone was fueling the fire from the shadows. Inside the study, the executives all wore grave expressions. The Lin family has joined forces with several investment banks to short our stock, the CFO reported, his voice trembling. Fu Qingyu sat at the head of the table, his right arm still in a sling, his expression terrifyingly calm. And several partners for the South City project have proposed terminating their contracts. They said they're concerned that President Fu's health renders him unfit to lead the project. Amidst the silence, Sun Yin gently pushed the door open. Carrying a bowl of freshly brewed medicine, she ignored the tense atmosphere in the room and walked straight to Fu Qingyu's side. It's time for your medicine. As Fu Qingyu took the bowl, his fingers inadvertently grazed hers. Though the contact was fleeting, she keenly perceived the chill in his fingertips, a typical symptom of liver stagnation and qi obstruction. That will be all for today, he suddenly told the executives. Proceed according to the original plan and ignore the rumors outside. The group looked at one another in dismay, but dared not ask questions, filing out one by one. As soon as the door closed, Fu Qingyu leaned back against his chair, eyes closed as he massaged his temples. Sun Yin stepped behind him, her fingers replacing his on his temples, massaging with just the right amount of pressure. "You're worried." It wasn't a question. He grasped her wrist and pulled her around to face him. "Sun Yin, if..." "There is no if." She interrupted him, her gaze clear as spring water. "Your pulse is more than twice as strong as it was a month ago, and the liver stagnation is improving. As long as you take your medicine on time and rest your mind, you'll be back to normal in less than half a month." "I was talking about the Fu Corporation." "The Fu Corporation is an extension of you." She leaned down to look him in the eye. "If you are strong, the corporation is strong. What you need to do now is not to clash head-on, but to conserve your strength and bide your time." She took out a silver needle and gently inserted it into the Naguan point on his wrist. "Only by steadying your mind can you see the situation clearly." The needle tip trembled slightly, and Fu Qingyu felt a refreshing sensation spread up his arm. His irritable mood actually began to settle. That night, someone tampered with Sun Yin's fetal protection medicine. Had it not been for the habit she had developed over years of practicing medicine, always carefully smelling the medicine before taking it, she might have fallen into the trap. "What is it?" Fu Qingyu became instantly alert when he saw her holding the bowl without moving for a long time. Sun Yin held the bowl out to him. "Smell this." He sniffed it carefully, and his expression changed abruptly. "The smell is off." Someone added safflower. Her voice remained calm. "The dosage isn't large, but it's enough to cause a miscarriage." Fu Qingyu stood up abruptly, his eyes filled with murderous intent. "Investigate it." An hour later, the truth came to light. The poisoner was a new helper in the kitchen who had taken money from the Lin family and secretly added the ingredient while brewing the medicine. "It was my oversight," Sun Yin said, looking at the helper kneeling and begging for mercy, her tone devoid of emotion. "I forgot to tell them that pregnant women must avoid medicines that activate blood circulation and remove stasis." Fu Qingyu dialed the elder Mr. Lin directly. "President Lin." His voice was as cold as tempered ice. "You can come after me, Fu Qingyu, but touch my wife." He paused, every word landing with the weight of steel. "And I will wipe the Lin family from the business world forever." There was a long silence on the other end before the line went dead. Fu Qingyu turned and pulled Sun Yin tightly into his arms. His arms trembled slightly from the exertion, as if he wanted to merge her into his very flesh and blood. "I won't let anyone hurt you or the baby ever again," he whispered in her ear, sounding like a solemn vow. Feeling his violent heartbeat, Sun Yin suddenly realized this child was no longer just the product of a transaction. He was the deepest bond between them. The next day, Fu Qingyu gathered all the servants and announced publicly, "From today on, Sun Yin is the sole mistress of the Fu household. Her command is my command." He looked at Sun Yin, his gaze more serious than ever before. "That includes me." Sunlight streamed in through the French windows, gilding him with a golden edge. Sun Yin gazed at this once wild and unruly man who had now sheathed all his sharpness for her sake. She gently placed a hand on her lower abdomen, feeling the quiet changes occurring there. Perhaps this was fate's most miraculous arrangement, beginning with an absurd transaction, yet inadvertently planting the seeds of the truest love. In the dead of night, Fu Qingyu's hand gingerly covered her lower abdomen. "Is he moving?" His voice was so soft, as if afraid to disturb something. Sun Yin couldn't help but smile. "It's only been 2 months. I can't feel it yet." Yet he did not give up. His palm remained gently pressed there, as if he could sense the little life growing within through her skin. "I will protect both of you," he promised in the darkness, "with everything I have." Sun Yin did not answer, but simply placed her hand gently over his. Beneath their overlapping palms lay a budding life and a sincerity just beginning to bloom. 12. The funeral for the Lin father and daughter took place on a gloomy, rainy morning. Fu Qingyu did not attend. Instead, he stood before the floor-to-ceiling window in his study, gazing toward the distant cemetery. Sun Yin draped a jacket over his shoulders, her fingers inadvertently brushing against the side of his neck. Stagnant heat in the liver meridian, blazing heart fire, she diagnosed softly. "You're angry. Shouldn't I be?" His voice was low. They were scheming right up to the moment they died. 3 days ago, Mr. Lin had died of sudden heart attack in the detention center. Forensic examination revealed it was caused by the long-term use of a drug that accelerated the heart rate. Upon learning of her father's death, Lin Weiwei had committed suicide by slashing her wrists with a piece of broken glass. Her suicide note, written in blood-curdling desperation, pinned all the blame on Fu Qingyu's heartlessness. It was a meticulously calculated trap, a gamble using 2 human lives to nail Fu Qingyu to the pillar of shame forever. "You aren't angry because of their scheming," Sun Yin pointed out sharply. "You're angry because they refuse to admit their wrongs, even in death." Fu Qingyu turned to look at her deeply. "You always see things so clearly. In traditional Chinese medicine, observation begins with the spirit." She met his gaze calmly. "Your spirit is in turmoil." She took his hand and placed 3 fingers on his wrist. The pulse was wiry and rapid, like pressing on a taut instrument string, a sign of extreme liver fire. "We need to change today's prescription." She released his hand. "I'll add gardenia and matan bark to clear the liver heat. Go sit quietly in the study for an hour, and then I will perform acupuncture on you." "Not now." He rubbed the space between his brows. "I have a video conference in an hour. I must stabilize the stock price. Nothing is more important than your health." Her tone brooked no argument. "Fu Qingyu, if you collapse, then the Fu Corporation is truly finished." An hour later, Fu Qingyu sat on the carpet in the study, at Sun Yin's insistence, claiming that grounding would help draw the fire downward. Silver needles pierced the Taichung and Xinjiang points, key acupoints of the liver meridian. Although Sun Yin's technique was extremely gentle, the sensation was so intense it sent a jolt through his entire body. "Bear with it." Her voice seemed to possess a calming power. "The liver fire has been suppressed for too long. It must be released." The tips of the needles trembled slightly. He felt a rush of heat surge from the soles of his feet straight to the top of his head, and fine beads of sweat seeped from his forehead. Just then, the baby in her womb suddenly moved. It was the first time the fetal movement had been so distinct. Sun Yin's hand trembled slightly, and the silver needle deviated by a fraction. "What's wrong?" He noticed immediately. "Nothing." She steadied her wrist and continued the acupuncture, a faint smile rippling across her lips. "It is your child, protesting that his father doesn't cherish himself enough." Fu Qingyu froze, then reached out to gently cover her lower abdomen. When he felt that slight thump, his gaze softened instantly. "He's moving." His usually steady voice held a rare note of surprise. "Yes." Sun Yin collected the silver needles. Even an unborn child knows that being alive is what matters most. This sentence struck Fu Qingyu's heart like a heavy hammer. That night, Fu Qingyu made a decision. He posted a long article on social media. There were no defenses, no accusations, just a calm recounting of the grievances with the Lin family over the years, as well as the truth about Lin Weiwei swapping his medication and poisoning him. At the end, he wrote, "Life is precious, and I cherish all who treat me with sincerity. From this day forward, the Fu Corporation will establish a mental health fund to help those who have lost their way in the turbulent sea of business. This serves as both a consolation to the departed and a warning to the living." As soon as the article was published, it caused a massive uproar. Public opinion, originally one-sided, began to fracture, and more people started to rationally consider the root cause of this tragedy. "This was a risky move," Sun Yin commented while changing his medicine. "You taught me," he said, gazing at her serious profile. "Sometimes, showing weakness is the strongest defense." Her hand paused slightly as she bandaged him. Outside the window, the rain that had fallen all day finally stopped. Moonlight broke through the clouds, spilling over the 2 embracing figures. Fu Qingyu's hand remained at the small of her back, a posture of complete protection. And for the first time, Sun Yin did not resist this overly intimate proximity. Perhaps some treatments to strengthen the foundation and cultivate vitality heal not just the body, but the heart as well. 13. The Fu family conference had not been this lively in decades. The long dining table was filled with elders and uncles of the Fu family, every one of them wearing a grave expression. At the head of the table, Fu Qingyu calmly pulled out a chair for Sun Yan. His movements were detailed and gentle, completely at odds with the tension filling the room. Qingyu, the eldest third great-uncle, was the first to attack, his cane striking the ground heavily. Fu Corporation's stock has been falling continuously, and partners are canceling contracts one after another. Do you have nothing to explain? Fu Qingyu unhurriedly served some food for Sun Yan before finally looking up. What explanation would third great-uncle like to hear? I heard that for the sake of a woman, you drove the Lin family to the brink, resulting in a death. Second uncle slammed the table and stood up. Now everyone outside is saying that our Fu family bullies others with our power. What do you propose we do? All eyes fell on Sun Yan, gazes filled with undisguised scrutiny and contempt. She sat quietly, her hand gently protecting her lower abdomen. Her morning sickness had become increasingly severe over the past few days. At this moment, the table full of delicacies smelled only of nauseating odors to her. Uncles, you are mistaken about one thing. Fu Qingyu's voice was not loud, yet it silenced everyone. It wasn't that I wanted to drive the Lin family to their death. It was the Lin family that tried to poison my wife and child. He stood up and placed a test report in the center of the dining table. These are the ingredients of the powder found on a kitchen helper: safflower and musk. Both are major taboos for pregnant women. If Nian weren't proficient in pharmacology, the one sitting here now would be a corpse with 2 lives lost. The room fell into dead silence. Several elders passed the report around, their expressions turning increasingly grim. Even so, you shouldn't have. Third great-uncle tried to speak again. Shouldn't have what? Fu Qingyu interrupted him, his gaze sweeping across the room. Shouldn't have protected my family? Or shouldn't have made the perpetrators pay the price? He walked to Sun Yan's side, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. I invited you all here today, not to explain, but to notify you. From this day forward, anyone who opposes the Fu Corporation opposes me, Fu Qingyu. And anyone who harms my wife, he paused, his voice as cold as a blade. I will make them repay it 100-fold. Back in the bedroom, Sun Yan could finally no longer hold it in and rushed into the bathroom. The nausea came fiercely. She knelt on the tiles, vomiting as if her heart and lungs were being torn apart. Fu Qingyu followed her in, wordlessly gathering her long hair and gently wiping her forehead with a wet towel. Is it very painful? He frowned deeply, looking at her pale face. Sun Yan shook her head with difficulty, unable to speak. Another wave of nausea hit her. She slumped over the sink, feeling as though her insides were being hollowed out. By the time she caught her breath, Fu Qingyu had already brought a glass of warm water. She took it to rinse her mouth, her fingertips trembling. This can't go on. He scooped her up into his arms. Starting tomorrow, cancel everything. You need to rest properly. No. She leaned against his chest, her voice weak. Your injuries haven't healed yet, and the prescription still needs adjusting. Nothing is more important than you and the child. He placed her on the bed and tucked her in. If the Fu Corporation falls, we can start over, but there can be no mishaps with you too. Sun Yan wanted to say something more, but another wave of nausea surged. She covered her mouth, curling up in pain. Fu Qingyu immediately pressed an Aiguan point on her wrist. She had taught him that massaging this acupoint could relieve nausea. His technique was still clumsy, but the pressure was just right. Is that better? He asked, his voice holding a rare tension. Sun Yan nodded, surprised by his attentiveness. He had actually taken to heart the traditional Chinese medicine knowledge she had taught him these past few days. As the nausea gradually receded, she closed her eyes in exhaustion. Fu Qingyu did not leave, however. He sat by the bedside, continuing to massage her acupoints. When I was sick as a child, my mother used to watch over me like this, he suddenly said. After she left, no one cared whether I was in pain or not. Sun Yan opened her eyes and saw his lowered lashes casting faint shadows on his face. This man, who appeared invincible to outsiders, was revealing a rare moment of vulnerability. I will care, she whispered. He looked up, his gaze deep. Always. Always. The promise was heavy, so heavy that both fell silent. Only their clasped hands betrayed the emotions weighing on their hearts. Late at night, Sun Yan was awakened by a faint noise. She opened her eyes to see Fu Qingyu standing by the window, the moonlight stretching his shadow long across the floor. He held a document in his hand, his brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" She sat up. Hearing her voice, he turned and immediately walked to the bed. "Did I wake you? What happened?" He hesitated for a moment before handing the document to her. Several investors in the Changnan project had withdrawn their capital. Sun Yin scanned the document quickly, her expression growing solemn. The funding gap was too large. If it couldn't be filled in time, the entire project would be stranded. Is it because of the Lin family's influence? Not just that. Fu Qingyu rubbed the space between his eyebrows. Someone is manipulating things behind the scenes, trying to use this opportunity to swallow up the Fu Corporation. He sat down beside her, his voice heavy with fatigue. "I might really have to let you and the child live through some hard times." But Sun Yin smiled. Under Fu Qingyu's puzzled gaze, she threw back the covers, got out of bed, and retrieved a yellowed notebook from the bottom layer of the medicine chest. "This is a collection of prescriptions left by my master," she said, handing the notebook to him. "It contains several ancient formulas that are extremely effective for the suboptimal health conditions of modern people." Fu Qingyu opened the notebook. It was densely packed with various medical prescriptions. Some of the ingredients were things he had never even heard of. "You mean the Fu Group can pivot?" Sun Yin's gaze burned bright. "Since they want to besiege us in our traditional sectors, we will open up a new battlefield." She pointed to one of the formulas. "Take this clear heart and bright-eyed drink, for example. It works wonders for relieving eye strain. Which office worker doesn't need that nowadays?" She pointed to another. "And this spirit-calming sleep powder. It is safer than sleeping pills and has no side effects." A light gradually began to shine in Fu Qingyu's eyes. He put down the notebook and looked at her deeply. "You thought of this a long time ago. Since the first time you took a knife for me." She admitted it frankly. "I was thinking about how I could repay your devotion." Outside the window, the first light of dawn appeared. A new day was about to begin, and their lives were about to open a new chapter. Fu Qingyu reached out and gently pulled her into his arms. This embrace held no lust, only overwhelming cherish. "Sun Yin," he whispered in her ear, "meeting you is the greatest luck of my life." In the morning light, two hands clasped tightly together, and between them, a new life was quietly growing. The air in the top-floor conference room of the Fu Group seemed to freeze. Seated on both sides of the long table were 7 white-haired elders. They were the most senior directors of the Fu Group and veterans who had conquered the business world alongside Fu Qingyu's father. At this moment, these old men were staring at the PowerPoint on the projection screen with a gaze bordering on scrutiny. The title of the presentation was Fu Group Strategic Transformation Plan, Layout for Traditional Chinese Medicine and Comprehensive Health Industry. Nonsense. The eldest, Director Chun, slammed the table. The Fu Group deals in real estate, finance, and high-tech. Now you want to sell Chinese medicine? If word gets out, where will our dignity be? Another director, Director Li, pushed up his reading glasses. "Qingyu, we know you dote on your wife, but using the entire group to play house with her, isn't that a bit too trifling?" Fu Qingyu sat at the head of the table, his expression calm. The bandage on his injured right arm had been removed. Only a plaster specially formulated by Sun Yin remained on his wrist, emitting a faint medicinal fragrance. "Uncles," he spoke, his voice steady. "3 months ago, when I was lying in a hospital bed waiting to die, where were all of you?" The conference room instantly fell silent. "It was the trifling matter you speak of that pulled me back from the gates of hell." His gaze swept across the room. "And it was this playing house that stabilized the Fu Group's stock price after the Lin family incident." He signaled his assistant to distribute documents. "This is the market research report. Currently, over 70% of the domestic population is in a state of suboptimal health, and the incidence of sleep disorders is nearly 40%. This is a blue ocean market worth trillions." The directors flipped through the documents, their expressions softening slightly, though their doubts remained. "Even so, We have neither the technology nor the experience. The technology is right here. The conference room door was pushed open, and Sun Yin walked in. She wore a simple white suit that cleverly concealed her slightly protruding abdomen. Her pace was steady, her gaze clear. Unless one looked closely, it was almost impossible to tell she was 4 months pregnant. She walked to the projection screen and opened an exquisite wooden box. Inside, arranged neatly, were over a dozen small porcelain bottles, each with a neatly affixed label. These are samples of the clear heart and bright eye drink. The main ingredients are goji berries, chrysanthemums, and cassia seeds. She distributed the porcelain bottles to the directors. Please give them a try. After working in front of a screen for 2 hours, add 3 drops to water and drink. Director Chun gave a cold snort and tossed the bottle aside. Director Li, however, curiously opened his and took a sniff. A refreshing medicinal fragrance wafted out. Sun Yin paid it no mind and continued. The food group does not need to start from scratch. What we possess are resources that other pharmaceutical companies can only dream of. Commercial real estate across the country that can serve as experience stores, and a massive high-end client base that represents our precise target users. And she paused for a moment, her gaze firm. Truly effective formulas, and an operations team capable of maximizing the value of these formulas. Just then, Director Chun suddenly clutched his chest, his face turning pale. Medicine! My medicine! His trembling hand reached for his pocket, but he found nothing. The conference room instantly erupted into chaos. Director Chun had a history of severe angina. Everyone knew this. Sun Yin stepped forward quickly and supported Director Chun. Don't move. She took out the silver needle she always carried with her and, amidst the stunned gazes of the crowd, precisely inserted it into the Naguan acupoint on his wrist. She then produced a tiny pill and placed it under his tongue. This is an improved formula of the instant cardio reliever pill. With added styrax and borneol, it takes effect even faster. Within moments, Director Chin's complexion began to return to normal, and his breathing stabilized. He looked at Sun Yin in disbelief, marveling at how the tightness in his chest had eased more quickly than ever before. What medicine is this? The food group's upcoming second product, the Peace of Mind pill. Sun Yin put away her silver needle, her tone calm, specifically targeted at acute cardiovascular and cerebrovascular conditions. The room fell into dead silence. Every director had witnessed this miraculous scene with their own eyes. Fu Qingyu spoke up at the perfect moment. Now, does anyone still doubt our technology? The voting result was a foregone conclusion, passed unanimously. Back in the CEO's office, Fu Qingyu finally let his mask of composure drop. He helped Sun Yin sit on the sofa, then knelt on one knee and pressed his ear against her lower abdomen. Are you tired? His voice was filled with distress. Sun Yin shook her head gently, her fingers combing through his hair. It went smoother than I imagined. It was because you were well prepared. He looked up, his eyes holding a look of pride. Those old hardliners. I've never seen them convinced so quickly. She smiled faintly. It wasn't persuasion. It was letting them see the value with their own eyes. As she spoke, she suddenly drew a sharp breath, grabbing his hand and pressing it against her belly. What's wrong? He instantly tensed up. He's moving. Sun Yin guided his hand. Here, can you feel it? Beneath his palm, the distinct fetal movement felt like a small fish swimming past. Fu Qingyu held his breath, feeling the wondrous rhythm of life. So lively, he chuckled softly. He'll definitely be like you. Being like you wouldn't be bad either. She looked at him, stubborn but reliable. Outside the window, the sun was setting. The city lights were beginning to come on, the glass curtain walls reflecting a golden glow. Fu Qingyu remained kneeling, his face pressed against her abdomen, as if listening to a secret known only to them. Sun Yin, he said softly, after the baby is born, let's hold a proper wedding. She was stunned. Not to ward off bad luck, not as a transaction. He looked up, his gaze gentle yet firm. It is because I want to marry you. That is all. The faint scent of medicinal herbs drifted quietly through the air, and the afterglow of the setting sun plated the embracing couple in a warm halo. In this moment, all schemes and calculations dissolved. There remained only two hearts, separated by flesh and blood, beating for the same future. The inauguration ceremony of the Fu Group's TCM Research and Development Center attracted the attention of the entire business world. Under the flashing magnesium lights, Fu Qingyu calmly unveiled the red silk covering the plaque. The gilded characters Fu Group Traditional Chinese Medicine Research and Development Center shone brightly in the sunlight, but a line of small text in the bottom right corner was even more eye-catching. Chief Consultant, Sun Yin. President Fu. Is the Fu Group's transition into the TCM field a spur-of-the-moment decision or part of a long-term plan? Industry insiders are calling this a desperate move. How do you respond? Does Ms. Sun Yin's role as chief consultant imply she will formally enter the Fu Group's management? The reporter's questions rained down like a barrage. Fu Qingyu raised his hand to signal for silence, then turned his gaze to Sun Yin beside him. Today, she wore a modified qipao, the silk fabric subtly tracing the soft curve of her baby bump, with a moon-white knitted cardigan draped over her shoulders. Facing the countless lenses, she simply smiled faintly and calmly took out a set of Bienstone tools. Before I answer your questions, please allow me to demonstrate an experiment. She invited 3 volunteers onto the stage, a programmer who worked constant overtime, a sales director who frequently entertained clients, and a young girl plagued by dysmenorrhea. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Sun Yin checked the pulse of each person in turn. This gentleman, do you often suffer from insomnia, vivid dreams, and a bitter taste in your dry mouth? The programmer nodded in surprise. You have excessive liver fire. You need to soothe the liver and regulate the qi. She gently pricked the Taichung acupoint with a needle, and the programmer immediately let out a long sigh of relief. I feel. My chest isn't stuffy anymore. The sales director was already dumbfounded when she mentioned gastric distension and acid reflux, and the young girl almost cried after Sun Yin accurately stated the number of years she had suffered from period pain and her symptoms. This isn't magic. This is traditional Chinese medicine. Sun Yin put away her tools and faced the camera. What the Fu Group wants to do is bring effective health solutions like this to everyone who needs them. The room fell silent, then erupted into thunderous applause. However, crisis always strikes when least expected. At the cocktail party following the ceremony, an uninvited guest arrived. Director Wang from the Health Bureau, a pharmaceutical administrator known for his severity. President Fu, congratulations. Director Wang raised his glass with a forced smile. However, I must remind you, drug approval is not child's play. Without clinical trial data, even the most miraculous folk remedy is illegal. The atmosphere instantly froze. Several interested investors quietly took a step back. Fu Qingyu was about to speak, but Sun Yin gently held his arm. Director Wang, she stepped forward with a smile. Have you been feeling weak in your waist and knees lately, with frequent urination at night? Especially in the latter half of the night, having to get up 2 or 3 times? Director Wang's smile stiffened on his face. How did you know? Your voice lacks vital energy, and you subconsciously hold your waist when standing. These are typical signs of kidney qi deficiency. Sun Yin took a small sachet from her clutch. Inside are eucammia bark, wolfberries, and dodder seeds. All excellent herbs for gently nourishing kidney qi. Place it by your pillow, and you will see results in 3 days. Director Wang took the sachet skeptically, said nothing more, and turned to leave. Fu Qingyu looked down at her. Are you confident? It's the basics of inspection, she said softly. Besides, I stated the facts. 3 days later, Director Wang called personally, his tone completely changed. Dr. Su, that sachet of yours. It's truly miraculous. I haven't slept this well in years. He not only readily approved the filing for all of the Fu Group's products, but also offered to make connections for the R&D center to import the most advanced testing equipment. When the news spread, the Fu Group's stock price instantly hit the daily limit. That night, in the bedroom, Fu Qingyu massaged Sun Yin's swollen feet. The discomforts of late pregnancy were beginning to show. Her ankles were swollen and shiny. Does it hurt? His movements were incredibly gentle. Sun Yin leaned against the headboard, feeling the warm pressure of his palms, and gently shook her head. Moonlight spilled in through the window, draping the room in a soft silver veil. "Thank you for today," he suddenly said. "For what?" "Many things." His fingers paused at the Yongquan point on the soles of her feet, pressing gently using the technique she had taught him. "Thank you for giving me a new life. Thank you for saving the Fu group, and thank you for being willing to stay by my side." Sun Yin gazed at his lowered eyes. This once arrogant man was now kneeling on one knee at her feet, performing a task that even professional caregivers might find tiring. "Fu Qingyu," she asked softly, "if the one who came for the wedding to ward off bad luck that day hadn't been me, would you still—" "No," he interrupted firmly. "It would only be you." He looked up, his gaze exceptionally deep in the moonlight. "Do you remember what you said the first time you gave me acupuncture? You said my pulse was like water leaking from a roof, and that heat toxins had sunk into my pericardium." She nodded. "In that moment, I knew you were different from the others." His hand gently covered her bulging abdomen. "You didn't come to ward off bad luck. You came to save me." The baby kicked just then as if in response. They looked at each other and smiled. "When the baby is born," he continued massaging, "I'll take you both back to visit the village where you grew up." Sun Yin was stunned. "Why?" "I want to see what kind of landscape raised a person like you." His voice was soft. "And then, we'll hold our wedding ceremony there." Amidst the faint scent of medicinal herbs, she reached out and caressed his cheek. This time, there were no silver needles, no pulse diagnosis, only a wife's most tender touch for her husband. The moonlight flowed silently, witnessing this union that began as a transaction but ended in true devotion. At 7 months, her pregnant belly was already quite heavy. Sun Yin held her waist, pacing slowly in the R&D center's laboratory. Outside, rain poured down in sheets, fiercely beating against the glass as if trying to break through every barrier. "The color of this batch of soothing powder isn't right." She stopped in front of the last decoction pot and spoke to the pharmacist in charge. "The heat was too high. The medicinal properties will be too drying. Brew it again." The pharmacist hurriedly took notes. Everyone in the laboratory was thoroughly convinced of the young chief consultant's abilities. She could always spot the slightest differences at a glance, and her grasp of medicinal properties was shockingly precise. Fu Qingyu pushed the door open and entered, his shoulders still damp from the rain. He first took a towel from his assistant to wipe his hands, ensuring the chill on his body wouldn't affect Sun Yin, before walking over to her side. "It's time to go back." His hand naturally protected her lower back. Qin Lang said to be extra careful in the last 2 months. Sun Yin nodded and let him support her as they walked out. The fatigue of late pregnancy came on suddenly, and she indeed needed rest. The car moved slowly through the rain. Fu Qingyu had the driver detour around a construction zone, choosing a smoother but slightly longer route. "The South City project will be completed next month." He held her hand, his fingertips unconsciously rubbing her slightly swollen fingers. "The herb garden you designed has already been populated with over 300 types of transplanted medicinal herbs." Sun Yin leaned against his shoulder, closing her eyes to rest. "When the baby is a month old, let's take him to see it." This was the first time she had actively planned a future for the three of them. It felt as if something had gently tugged at Fu Qingyu's heart. However, upheaval always descends at the most tranquil moments. Late at night, Sun Yin woke up in severe abdominal pain. Cold sweat instantly soaked her pajamas. She subconsciously reached for the silver needles by her pillow, but her fingers trembled from the pain. "Nian Yan." Fu Qingyu woke with a start. When he turned on the bedside lamp and saw her pale face, his heart nearly stopped. "What's wrong?" "Contractions." She gritted her teeth. "It's too early. Only 32 weeks. The realization made Fu Qingyu go cold all over. He immediately pressed the emergency call bell while grabbing his phone to contact the hospital. "Don't be afraid." He held her hand tightly, though his voice shook even more than hers. "I'm here." The ambulance siren pierced the rainy night. Fu Qingyu ran out following the stretcher, even forgetting to put on shoes. The rain instantly soaked his pajamas, but he remained completely unaware. Inside the delivery room, the situation was critical. Fetal heart rate is dropping. The midwife's voice was tense. The mother's blood pressure is falling too. Sun Yin maintained a shred of clarity amidst the agonizing pain. She grabbed Fu Qingyu's hand, her breath weak. Needles, my needles. He understood immediately, taking her Bien stone needle set from the medicine pouch he carried. Higa, Senyan Jio. She guided him, every word seemingly squeezed out from between her teeth. Fu Qingyu's hand was trembling. He could handle billion-dollar business decisions with composure. Yet, at this moment, he couldn't even hold a needle steady. Trust me. Sun Yin looked at him, her sweat-soaked hair sticking to her forehead, but her eyes were unusually firm. And trust yourself. He took a deep breath. Following the technique she had taught him countless times, he accurately inserted the needle into the Higu point on her hand, then the Senyanjio point on her leg. Miraculously, the numbers on the fetal heart monitor began to rise. Keep going. Sun Yin guided him. Li, one needle after another. In this modern delivery room, the most ancient medical art was creating a miracle. When the child's first cry rang out, Fu Qingyu almost collapsed. He knelt before the delivery bed, burying his face in her sweat-dampened palm. It's a boy. The nurse brought the cleaned infant over. The child, so small it made one's heart ache, lay quietly in Sun Yin's arms like a fragile kitten. He's too small. She gently stroked her son's nearly transparent skin, her voice choking up. It's all Mommy's fault. No. Fu Qingyu kissed her forehead. You saved him, and you saved me. In the neonatal intensive care unit, the child lay in an incubator. Sun Yin insisted on coming every day to give the child touch therapy. Her technique was unique. She massaged gently along the meridians, her fingertips carrying a warm internal energy. This is the Peiyuan Gubin technique, cultivating vitality and strengthening the foundation, she explained to Fu Qingyu. It will help him adapt to this world better. She would also place specially made medicine sachets next to the incubator. The herbs inside were carefully proportioned to calm the spirit and promote development. You can treat even such a small child, the head nurse asked in surprise. Traditional Chinese medicine knows no age limits. Sun Yin looked tenderly at her son. It only distinguishes symptoms. Fu Qingyu stood to the side, watching his wife's focused profile. She had lost a lot of weight since the birth, but that resilience radiating from within her was more dazzling than ever. That evening, when he pushed Sun Yin in her wheelchair to the NICU, he found an extra small sachet next to the incubator. It had been sewn jointly by several old pharmacists from the R&D center, containing protective herbs they had meticulously prepared. Even more touching was a letter signed by all the employees of the R&D center. Chief Consultant Su, the little young master will definitely grow up healthy. Because he has a mother like you, a father like President Fu, and the blessings of all of us. Sun Yin held the letter, tears falling like rain. Fu Qingyu gently embraced her. Look, it's not just the two of us who love him. Outside the window, the rain had passed, and the sky was clear. A rainbow spanned the horizon, dazzling and magnificent. Inside the incubator, that originally frail child grew stronger day by day. His small hands and feet began to kick with strength, and his cries became louder. Sun Yin continued to massage him every day, while Fu Qingyu learned every nursing skill. For this couple who once dominated the business world, their greatest achievement now was enabling their son to sleep soundly. Let's give him a name, Sun Yin said. Fu Qingyu pondered for a moment. How about Fu Peiyuan? Cultivating the primordial and strengthening the foundation. This is not only the essence of traditional Chinese medicine, but also our hope for him. Peiyuan, Sun Yin murmured softly, the corners of her lips curling into a gentle arc. It's a good name. She lowered her head and lightly touched her son's tiny hand. That little hand immediately grasped her finger tightly, with unexpected strength. The power of life was thus transmitted through their fingertips. The invitations for Fu Peiyuan's 100-day banquet stirred an undercurrent in the capital's circle of power and wealth. On the gilded invitation, beside the Fu Group's emblem, was stamped an exquisite pattern of a reishi mushroom, the brand logo of Ninqing Hall. Even more striking was the venue, the Fu family's ancestral residence, a forbidden ground that had not been open to the public for 20 years. Are you sure you want to hold it here? Sun Yin asked, cradling her son as she stood in the newly renovated flower hall of the old residence. Morning light filtered through the carved window lattices, casting fragmented shadows upon her pale moon-white Cheongsam. Fu Qingyu embraced her from behind, his chin resting lightly on the crown of her head. This was meant to be our home. He took the babbling Pei Yuan, and the little fellow immediately grabbed his father's finger and stuffed it into his mouth. The frailness from his birth was long gone. Pei Yuan was now chubby and fair, and he loved to smile. His eyes, strikingly similar to Sun Yan's, were as bright as black grapes immersed in water. He's especially excited today. Sun Yan smiled, watching her son wave his arms and kick his legs in his father's arms. He knows he's going to meet people. Fu Qingyu lowered his head, his nose gently brushing against the baby's milky-scented cheek. Before the banquet began, the old residence welcomed a special guest. Qin Lang arrived with a full set of medical equipment for the routine 4-month postpartum checkup. When he checked Sun Yan's pulse, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Your recovery is even better than expected. This doesn't look like the result of just standard postpartum confinement." Sun Yan, who was breastfeeding Pei Yuan, looked up at his words. "I used the ancient Douyin technique combined with herbal fumigation." The Douyin technique recorded in the Su 1. Qin Lang was shocked. "Isn't that lost to history?" "There were fragments in the manuscripts my master left behind. I completed them." She spoke casually, as if restoring a medical text lost for a millennium was a commonplace matter. Fu Qingyu stood by the door, watching this scene. Sunlight streamed through the lattice, forming a soft halo around Sun Yan. Her posture as she nursed was natural and elegant, as if she were born for this, both a miracle-working doctor and a gentle, resilient mother. In this moment, he suddenly understood the meaning of returning to simplicity and truth. By evening, guests filled the house. Fu Qingyu stood in the center of the flower hall holding his son, while Sun Yan demonstrated the art of tea at a table nearby. She was using her own blend, 100-day calming tea, designed specifically for postpartum recovery. "This tea has a unique aroma," a senior team master exclaimed after tasting it. "It tastes mellow and sweet, warms the stomach, and leaves one feeling refreshed." Sun Yan smiled and explained, "It contains roasted red dates and longan, along with a small amount of processed sour jujube kernels and silk tree flowers. It replenishes qi in blood while calming the mind." As she spoke, her gaze never left Pei Yuan in Fu Qingyu's arms. The little fellow was particularly cooperative today. Dressed in a small red tang suit, he babbled at the passing guests from the crook of his father's arm, occasionally flashing a toothless grin that melted everyone's hearts. Lin Weiwei's mother was also among the invited. She stood at a distance, watching the happy family of 3 with a complex expression. When Fu Qingyu passed by with the child, she couldn't help but step forward. May I hold him?" Everyone held their breath. Fu Qingyu looked at Sun Yan, and seeing her nod slightly, he carefully handed Pei Yuan over. Holding the child, the old lady's eyes suddenly reddened. If Weiwei had. Before she could finish, Pei Yuan suddenly reached out his little hand and grabbed the jade pendant on her chest. That jade was a Lin family heirloom. Lin Weiwei used to grab and play with it just like this when she was small. The old woman's tears finally fell. She gently kissed Pei Yuan's forehead, took off the pendant, and placed it in his hand. "This is for you, my little lucky star." This gesture symbolized that all past grievances were hereby turned over and forgotten. Late at night, when all became quiet and the guests had dispersed, Fu Qingyu and Sun Yan stood side by side in the courtyard of the old residence, looking up at the starry sky. Pei Yuan was already fast asleep in Annie's arms, his little hands still tightly clutching that piece of jade. "After today, no one will question Yinqing Hall again," Fu Qingyu said. Sun Yan shook her head. "However, there will always be doubts. What matters is that we know we are doing the right thing." She turned to face him, her eyes shining like stars in the night. "Just as I know that marrying you is the right thing to do." This sentence was more moving than any sweet nothings. Fu Qingyu pulled her into his embrace, feeling their heartbeats against each other in this old house that held so many memories. "When Pei Yuan is a bit older," he whispered in her ear, "I will take you both back to visit the village where you grew up. I want to see what kind of landscape nurtured you. Sun Yin buried her face against his chest, nodding gently. Moonlight flowed like water, quietly bathing the embracing couple. From the distance came the babbling sounds of Pei Yuan in his sleep, like the most beautiful nocturne. In this moment, all calculations and schemes faded away. All that remained was the most authentic companionship and the purest happiness. 18. The road to the village was rougher than Fu Qingyu had imagined. The SUV bumped along the winding mountain road. Yet Pei Yuan in the back seat was surprisingly quiet, his dark, round eyes wide as he watched the bamboo forest flashing past the window. Sun Yin held their son, her fingers lightly stroking the soft crown of his head, her gaze calm as still water. We're almost there. She pointed toward a mist-shrouded hollow ahead. Under the old locust tree at the village entrance, a crowd had already gathered. Men and women, young and old, craned their necks, bursting into cheers as soon as they spotted the convoy. Yin Yin is back, and she brought the baby. As soon as the car came to a steady halt, a silver-haired old woman stepped forward tremulously, her calloused hands tightly grasping Sun Yin's. Good child, you finally come back. Fu Qingyu stepped out of the car, holding his son, and was immediately surrounded by rustic warmth. The villagers presented wild fruits, still glistening with dew, freshly cooked sticky rice cakes, and 100 family threads wrapped in red paper. A village tradition to pray for the child's blessings. This must be Yin Yin's husband, right? The old woman squinted to size up Fu Qingyu, then suddenly grabbed his wrist. After a moment, she nodded. His pulse is steady and calm. He is a reliable man. Fu Qingyu looked at Sun Yin in surprise. This is the village's grandma, Aga. Sun Yin smiled. The best herbalist here. Sun Yin's old house had been kept just as it was, mud walls and tiled roof, and was immaculately clean. Everyone took turns cleaning it, Grandma Agaway said, holding Sun Yin's hand. We all knew you would return. In the herb garden behind the house, the medicinal plants were growing lush and green. Sun Yin held Pei Yuan, pointing the plants out to him one by one. This is Hautuinia. It clears heat and detoxifies. This is plantain. It helps with water retention. The little guy babbled, his small hands waving in the air. Fu Qingyu stood to the side, watching the mother and son. Sunlight filtered through the bamboo leaves, dappling Sun Yin's figure. She wore a simple cotton dress, her hair loosely pinned up, looking worlds apart from how she appeared at the Fu residence. Here, she was more relaxed, more authentic. I need to go somewhere. Sun Yin suddenly passed Pei Yuan into his arms and picked up her medical kit. Uncle Chun, the elderly ward over the hill, is coughing up blood. I'm going to take a look. Uncle Chin's home was deep in the mountains. The low earthen house was dark and damp. The old man lay on the bed, coughing as if he might vomit up his lungs. After checking his pulse, Sun Yin took out her silver needles. It's a lung abscess with built-up fluid, she explained as she administered the needles. I need to drain the pus and detoxify the system. Fu Qingyu stood by the door holding his son, watching his wife's focused profile. The silver needles seemed to come alive at her fingertips, trembling slightly with her movements. Within a quarter of an hour, the old man's coughing had largely subsided. Nin, Uncle Chan said, tears streaming down his weathered face. If it weren't for you, these old bones would have long ago. Sun Yin gently shook her head and wrote out a prescription. Take the medicine on time, and you'll be fine in half a month. The sun was setting by the time they made their return trip. Sun Yin carried a bamboo basket filled with herbs on her back, while Fu Qingyu held their sleeping son. The shadows of the three stretched long across the mountain path. Did you often make house calls like this? He asked. I used to. She adjusted the strap of the basket. There is no doctor in the village, so everyone comes to me when they are sick. The mountain path was difficult to traverse, yet she walked it as if it were flat ground. Watching her light, agile figure, Fu Qingyu suddenly understood. This mountain, these villagers, were her true roots. That night, Grandma Agwe brought over a yellow journal. This was left by your master. The old woman solemnly entrusted the journal to Sun Yin. He said I could only give it to you when you truly understood the way of medicine. On the title page, written in elegant small script, were the words, "To be a healer is to heal. A great healer heals the heart before healing the body." Sun Yin turned the pages one by one. Inside, it recorded not only precious prescriptions, but also years of insights and reflections on practicing medicine. When she turned to the last page, she froze. There, recorded in detail, was the story of her biological mother. It turned out her mother was also a healer who had passed away after contracting an illness while saving villagers during a plague. On her deathbed, she had entrusted Sun Yin, then still in swaddling clothes, to her master. Your mother said, Grandma Age wiped away tears, that she hoped you would grow up to lead an ordinary life and never need to know these things. But I felt that you ought to know where your roots lie. Fu Qingyu gently grasped Sun Yin's trembling hand. Moonlight shone through the wooden window lattice, illuminating the yellowed pages. Sun Yin's tears fell silently, landing beside her mother's handwriting. It turned out the belonging she had been searching for had been here all along. The next morning, Sun Yin took Fu Qingyu and Pei Yuan to the back mountain. On a slope covered in wildflowers, there stood two simple tombstones. One was her master, the other was the mother she had never met. She lit 3 sticks of incense and knelt before the grave, holding Pei Yuan in her arms. Mother, master, I have returned. Her voice was soft in the mountain breeze, yet unmistakably firm. I have also brought your grandson and my husband. Fu Qingyu knelt beside her and bowed deeply in solemn respect. Pei Yuan seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. He nestled quietly in his mother's arms, his little hand reaching curiously toward the wildflowers before the headstone. The mountain breeze brushed past, carrying the fresh fragrance of the vegetation. Smoke from cooking fires curled upwards from the distant village, while a nearby mountain spring tinkled melodiously. Sun Yin gently placed her master's journal before the grave. I will continue to protect what you have guarded. Fu Qingyu wrapped his arm around her shoulder and whispered a promise in her ear. We will do it together. As they descended the mountain, Sun Yin's steps were exceptionally light. It was as if she had shed a heavy burden carried for years, or perhaps that she had finally found her true home. Pei Yuan babbled in his father's arms, waving his little hands at the medicinal herbs that covered the mountainside. Perhaps, guided by fate, this child, in whose veins flowed the blood of healers, had already sensed the call of his destiny.